I am Warren Sprouse here on the Bible Forum. This particular program is being recorded the first Sunday in December 2020. We are in the midst of a pandemic, as they tell us, and that we must wear masks when we go out to keep from spreading this deadly coronavirus. But the question becomes, do lockdowns and masks even work? Why don't the elderly, those with underlying health conditions, and the obese be the ones who sequester themselves or take reasonable precaution rather than shutting down the entire world's economy? Indeed, there's a mounting evidence that government intervention has, surprise of all surprises, actually made things worse. As of November 18, 2020, there have been 34,058 COVID deaths in the state of New York. Of these, over 6,500, or approximately 1 in 7, total deaths were nursing home deaths that were a direct result of Governor Andrew Cuomo's policy of forcing nursing homes to accept COVID patients and lock them down with the vulnerable and uninfected. This is a concrete example of government lockdown measures killing people. But you're not going to hear this in the controlled media. What about the omnipresent masks that we are now seeing everywhere, to the point where someone without a mask is seen as very strange? They must work, of course. But there is very little evidence that masks prevent the transmission of COVID or any other respiratory infection. Most of what we hear are experts making every effort to be as safe as possible. In every randomized clinical trial ever conducted, there have been inconclusive findings that mask wearing aided in suppressing transmission of respiratory diseases. Studies generally rely upon fitted N95 respirators that must be sterilized after every use, or surgical masks that should be thrown away. We have more evidence that typical masks cause headaches than that they prevent COVID-19. Compare this to what you see on your average trip to the grocery store. People wearing unfitted cloth masks that get occasionally cleaned, maybe. Many people don't even bother to pull them up over their noses. And therefore, most mask wearing is useless and little more than a form of social control or a forced act of solidarity. There's magical thinking involved in the current mask mandates. If cases go up, it's because people weren't good little boys and girls and didn't wear their masks. If they go down, everyone has been well behaved and gets a pat on the back for wearing their face diaper. Some evidence suggests that masks make people feel magically protected from the virus, and thus they do not take common sense precautions against all disease, such as hand washing, keeping fingers off the face, covering their nose when they sneeze, and so forth. What this means at its root is that people are trading effective measures for ineffective theater. Mask reuse likewise increases infection rates, and who among us isn't guilty of that? What's more, studies suggest that people who wear the cloth masks that are now virtually required to do anything outside of one's home lead to an increase of flu-like symptoms, and thus create lots of COVID paranoia where there ought not be any. It was only in March that many experts were urging people not to wear masks at all. There's also the soft effect of mask wearing. There is significant evidence to suggest that children living under COVID will have their emotional and psychological development severely stunted and warped thanks to mask orders. As if you needed another reason to pull your kids out of the public school. Indeed, we have a mountain of troubling data about the social effects of mass mask wearing that go back decades. Put simply, masks make people stupid, pliant, and antisocial. Examples of findings from mask studies include a 1979 study that found children were more likely to take more than their allotted amount of Halloween candy if they were masked. A 1989 study that found masking led people to abandon defense mechanisms and revert to more primitive psychological states. Studies conducted in 2005 and 2017 found neurological evidence inhibits both impulse control and identity formation, decreasing prefrontal cortex activity. Repeated studies have found that masking reduces blood flow to the brain. A number of public figures have backed off of masking as a panacea, instead pushing it as an act of social solidarity. Sure, masks might not actually do anything, but what about people's feelings? British politicians Michael Gove and Nicole Sturgeon are indicative of this trend. Your social betters are not actually afraid of COVID. Perhaps the best evidence that this is all just a bit of political theater is seeing how our media and political class actually behave when they think nobody's watching. Chris Cuomo, brother of Governor Andrew Cuomo, often referred to as Fredo, due to paling in comparison with his brother, was quarantined for 2 weeks, not for abstract reasons, but because he actually was exposed to COVID. Of course, this didn't stop him from leaving his house unmasked after he got tired of lifting fake weights on our camera. Bill de Blasio, the mayor of New York, with questionable connections to communist organizations and a daughter in Antifa, was caught at the gym and didn't feel even a twinge of shame about it, explaining that he needs to go to the gym. But you do not. Lori Lightfoot, mayor of Chicago, told Chicagoans to stay home for Thanksgiving. Didn't stop her from taking to the streets following Joe Biden's victory in the 2020 presidential election to celebrate. Gavin Newsom, governor of California, has presided over some of the harshest lockdowns in the nation, going so far as to shut off power and water to people who defy his lockdown dictates. But he somehow finds time to dine out at a 3-star restaurant called French Laundry with some of the top medical bureaucrats in the state. He's not the only governor who believes in lockdowns for thee, but not for me. Gretchen Whitmer from Michigan went as far as to threaten lockdown protesters with further lockdowns because of their protests. She's a bit of a poster child for the mediocre people who have appointed themselves COVID cops. Whitmer put in some of the most restrictive lockdowns in the country, then attempted to use them to blackmail Michiganders into voting for Joe Biden. In November, she began threatening jail time for businesses who did not record personal details of their customers for her personal perusal. Her husband attempted to throw his weight around to get his boat moved into place for vacation early in violation of state orders. All this and more makes the mask wearing and the lockdowns look more like kabuki theater. And we're all just wondering how gullible we are, or how easily led, and where this is taking us in the next couple of generations.